Hello. So today I wanted to shift gears completely on the channel here, and I talk about it in other videos sometimes when I'm sharing some experience or a story that this channel is becoming more of a overall just a general type channel versus focused in one area. A lot of times we talk about vintage uh, equipment, antiques, that kind of stuff, old fans, but certainly it's morphed into some other areas as well. And at times I get comments and people ask me, "Oh, do you just record videos all day long?" I wish. I wish, because it's really a fun hobby for me. I really do enjoy it, and I have all of you to thank. And I've talked about this in other videos of kind of some of my influences who have influenced me to get in front of the camera, and I want to be thankful for that. So, with that being said, some of the comments I get is, what do you do for a living? Are you in video? I've gotten things like that. Some people think that I work for Lasco, which I think is pretty funny, and that would kind of be a dream job. But I don't work for Lasco, although to be head of their product, or head of sales, or head of distribution, or shoot CEO, that would be pretty cool, and that actually aligns with my experience, and that's where I'm going with this video. So I am an executive by day, and I'm currently, in my current role, I am a president slash CEO of the organization I work for. And I do sometimes speaking engagements to college students, which I find incredibly rewarding. And fairly recently, I was at a speaking engagement to a bunch of college students. They had a sales and marketing course, which is neat because when I was in college, I don't recall a class specifically on sales. Yes, there's marketing and there's marketing majors, but not a class on sales. So in my previous role, I was a vice president of sales, and I was I made kind of friends with the professor, so I came in for her to teach a session, a night class, and it was a little intimidating because you have early 20 something year olds, and you have them in a night class on a Monday night, and you have to, I think it went 3 hours, you have to be compelling and interesting to hold their attention. And to me, I put more pressure on myself than I think I would in a regular business meeting, because these kids are impressionable, and you certainly want to be able to deliver something to them that they might take with them when they leave school. That's all I was hoping for. So what I wanted to talk about today is, I was reflecting upon that because turned out to be a very successful session. I was blown away by the response and people waiting after class, which was again a night class, to speak to me. So what I wanted to talk about is things that they don't really teach you in college, right? But you should be aware of. And there's not really a course out there that says preparing for the real world. Yeah, you can learn a lot of theory, and there's a lot of great professors who have experience outside of higher education or academics, who have been a business executive or done these things. Super knowledgeable, know the material in and out, no doubt. But what I was talking to these students, ultimately we got into a discussion about is areas in which, how do you know that you have found the right job if you've just graduated? How much time do you give it before you move on to the next one? And I know, and maybe it's a perception thing, that generally younger people are softer than the generation before them. They expect to have things handed to them immediately. and then hopefully live up to whatever they were given, whether it's a higher salary or whatever the case may be. So I'm going to comment on that. I'm going to comment on my experience as a hiring manager and my experience as somebody who was that fresh person out of college looking for a job, right? So as a hiring manager, there is the perception when you hire people, especially with less experience, so maybe a couple years out of school, maybe it's their second job. Typically, in my role now, we're hiring. I'm responsible for the overall organization, so there's typically hiring managers between me and the actual employee, but they have me involved in the interviewing process. So many times we'll get people who interview very extremely well, got good grades in school, but when they come in, it's almost like they'll tell you, my goal is to be CEO. I'm going to be CEO. Okay, well, if I had a dime for every time someone said that, well, you know the rest. So there is that, right? And I'm talking about people who come in late all the time. I'm not saying that you have to take your work home with you, but I do think, especially if you're up and coming, where you lack in experience, you can make up for in work ethic, right? And someone may say, you know what, this promotion has come down to two people. This person over here they have less experience, but boy, do they put the time in. Boy, are they doing everything they can to become a better professional. That's who I want on my team. So I could tell endless stories, and maybe in another video I'll tell some stories of younger people and some of the antics that they've put us through. And what I've learned as a hiring manager with the younger generation at times is, if they have all the potential in the world, all the tools in the world, and you put them in a situation where maybe is a better situation than you had at their age or at their experience level, and they don't succeed, at some point you have to say, if they don't want to do it, regardless if they have the ability, the skill set, if they just don't want to do it, you can't make them do it. And either they will just continue on as a mediocre employee, or something, they'll move on, and hopefully professionally and personally they grow up and light a fire under themselves. So that's kind of my perception a little bit, and maybe again another video on some specific examples. But on the other side, as somebody, when I graduated college, and this is really where I want to get into it on the video, about what to put up with in the workplace and what not to put up with, and then making that decision on your own. So when I started, I sat in a cubicle inside sales, and I was just calling customers. And I wasn't very good at it at first. And that's the funny thing too, is when I stand in front of a group of people, college students or whatever, and they're like, oh, to get it to your level, you must have been a natural born salesperson or a natural born. No, as a salesperson, I was horrible. I was horrible when I started. But with a business background, I chose sales because I thought that could be my door into business, because nobody really hires, unless you go to some Harvard business school or whatever. No one hires somebody to run anything or be in charge of anything right out of college. You kind of have to work your way through. And I worked my way up through sales and sales management, and that's what ultimately led me into the executive level. So when I first started, and I sat in a cubicle and I was making calls, yes, cold calls, account management type calls, again, I was not good at it. And when I say I wasn't good at it, I didn't have any training. They just put me out there. They just said, here, call these people, tell them about the new software. I didn't understand what value proposition was. I didn't understand sales messaging. I had no idea what that stuff even was. No one showed it to me. No one explained it to me. So I was just reading off a features list, features and benefits list, and leaving voice messages rattling off features and benefits. I was horrible. And I'll get into a story in a different video how I improved and got pretty good at it. But I worked really, really hard. Even if I was not good or had great results, I was working really hard. I was putting in the extra time. And at the time I was just into the workforce, you didn't really have the ability, like we didn't even have laptops at the office at that, like you had like a tower in a cubicle. So I wasn't like taking my computer home, but I would use my home computer to like log into Exchange and try to do emails and all these things. So I was putting in the effort, and I was also willing to look in the mirror. And I think, and that's a whole nother video on its own, willing to adapt, right? So this work environment, here's the part where they don't tell you in school. I worked for a guy who, he was a vice president of sales. I was 22 years old, 23 years old, sitting in a cubicle. And this guy would scream at us. I mean, yell at us. And he was a fairly young guy at that time. He was in his early 30s, so that's young. That's a baby to me these days. And he would scream at us. He would tell us, you know, I don't care if customers like you, get them to effing, you know, close. Very Boiler Room, if you know that movie, or Glengarry Glen Ross, that kind of thing. We would have a weekly sales meeting Friday mornings, and they would bring bagels into the kitchen, which was great. That was like, oh yeah, bagels for free. And we would be in this conference room, and it was always something. And we could have a good month, a bad month, a good week, it didn't really matter. And I remember sitting there, and my boss going around the room. We must have had a slower week or something like that. And we had a brand new guy who had just started a week before. He's sitting in there, and he was a really nice guy. He was a guy ultimately who kind of, like, get into it in another video, who kind of sparked my turnaround in sales early in my career, because I watched what he did. So he was a little more seasoned than me. The VP of sales just goes around the room, dead serious. He goes, we had a bad month. I can fucking fire you. I can fucking fire you. I can fucking fire you. Right finger right in the face, using the F word. And he said, I can get a bunch of effing high schoolers to do your jobs. You're horrible. And like, look, if this was football, that would be motivating. Maybe not these days. Maybe back in the day, that would be motivating. You know, like, I could cut you. Like, work harder. Yeah, because in that situation, if you're a football coach, you want to make your team angry, right? So they physically perform. Where this is, you know, he's lucky someone didn't rip his face off. But I was, again, young, and I had coworkers who would just fold under that pressure. And we had people there at all different experience levels. There was about 7 or 8 of us in that room. And I just really focused on listening to the message, not the delivery, and whether I agreed with the delivery or not, but would always try to make that my takeaway. I always, even as a 23-year-old, looked for something constructive I could use or take away to use to be a better professional, even at that young age. And I put up with a lot. I mean, there was times, there was another sales meeting where a sales rep guy I like, he asked, we were wrapping up a meeting, and we actually were surviving that meeting until, and it's funny, I'm still friendly with these guys. We haven't worked together in years, but if we go out and have a beer, we actually impersonate these interactions, because they're so off the wall. And looking back, we said we should have had written, if YouTube and all that stuff was around then, we should have written some comedy skit or something and acted out. But we were at the end of a meeting. We survived it, so we thought. And the boss goes, Any other questions before we get back to it? Again, it's Friday, probably like 8:30 in the morning, and one of my coworkers goes, "Hey, this person, we'll call her Jane Doe. This person, Jane Doe, keeps posting in message boards. She was like a former consultant, negative things about our software when customers are asking." This guy, this VP of sales, it was like somebody flipped a switch. His face turned red, and he stood up and he said her name and go at the top of his lungs, "I will effing murder her," like right in my coworker's face. And he was like, and he wouldn't back down. My coworker, he was a guy who had a little more experience, and he was just like, I was just asking, like, in his face, like, we joke, but we weren't joking when we retold the story. Spit flying everywhere, and but that was the work environment I worked in. So I'm trying to paint a picture. And we walk out of that conference room, and you see these sets of eyes popping above the cubicles, wondering what the hell just happened. But again, I just went and sat down at my desk and picked up the phone and started calling. I'm a very happy-go-lucky guy. Like, I usually, I'm not too high, not too low, and pretty much, like, for the most part, pretty positive. So I just kind of like tunnel vision. Like, I'm a young kid. I have a apartment rent and a cell phone bill and a car payment probably at that point in my life. But I was like, I need this job, and I want to show my resume, separate myself that I've been at a job for more than 2 minutes. Last example, and then I'll kind of wrap it up or head towards that. We were coming out with a new version of our software, and we had all the salespeople in a room, and a guy from the software department or whatever standing up there doing a training on what's new with the new release. And so at the end, he asked basically the rhetorical question. He goes, "I want you to think about if I'm an existing customer and you're talking to me, what are some of the top things that you could get into a conversation about in the new software that may make me interested in buying new software? So be thinking about that." So that was the end of the training. We're like, okay, that was like a great way to just kind of have us thinking that way. Well, the VP of sales was sitting in the back of the room in one of those chairs with the wheels on it. And he starts slow clapping. And we thought he was clapping because we were done training. And all of a sudden he goes, "How the F," he says the F word, and I know I said it earlier, probably shouldn't. "How the F are you going to sell this thing if you can't answer that question?" And he gets up so hard, and his chair slams in, because it's on wheels, slams into the wall, runs up to my coworker and puts his hands on his shoulders, and he comes and slaps me on my ribs, and he says his last name. He goes, "Come on," and says my last name, "Come on." And like, because we happen to be the closest ones, he's like, what are you gonna do to sell it? I mean, this guy, that company doesn't exist anymore. It got sold, and people don't work there anymore, but those same people and all. And he was brutal. And I watched people quit, rightfully so. And so here's what I was talking, really the point of my message, talking with the kids the college students. There's a time where you're going to, early in your career, when you're going to have to make a decision to either put up with a not so great working environment. And let me be clear, I would not work somewhere, or would I endorse or encourage anyone to work anywhere where anything illegal's going on, or any sexual harassment based on race, religion, political point of view. That's unacceptable. That's a non-negotiable. But in terms of, and someone argued like, "Oh no, that guy just put his hand on you in the last one." Like, hey, look, I'm a big, strong guy. If I thought he was trying to hurt me, there would have been a different outcome there. So what I did was I put up with it. I put up with it, and I ended up becoming one of the top sales guys there. And I ultimately got promoted. I got promoted once there, yeah. And I was there for 6 years. When it came time to leave that job, I was still a young guy in my 20s with 6 years with the same job. That really separated myself from my peers because it's 6 months there, 2 months, 2 years there, a year there, 8 months there. And I, as a hiring manager to this day, I think it's even worse than it was back then. And I look for continuity. And I do think a lot of hiring managers today still look for that. So my point being is, you are going to have to make a decision of what is tolerable and what is not. And I'm not saying you have to sit there and take it. But on your way up, when you get to the point where I am in my career, you look back and you're grateful for the decisions that you made or didn't make because they helped get you to where you are. And most importantly, you've learned from them. I always said if I became a VP, this is not how I operate. No, I did not operate that way. So think about that. They don't talk about that in college. They don't talk about, they may go as far as talk to you about how to get the job, maybe some interview skills, how to present yourself. But once you onboard and go through the process, that work life, like the work environment. And yes, we definitely have no room for sexual harassment, racial harassment, bullying. And granted, one would argue I was being bullied and harassed, but it's hard to explain. And the irony is in that company, people used to say, newer people would say, why don't we go to HR? Well, the HR person reported to him. What a weird org structure. So like we became friendly with this person, and she, we would hang out outside of work as a group. She would say, hey, you could say all you want, but he doesn't care. He'll tell you to, he'll fire you. Like he'll ask me who's making these complaints. So there was just nothing you really could do. And at 23 years old, at that point in time, that's how I thought like the world worked in the workplace. And I just thought, okay, I just have to get my wings and try to move up into management and, change a workplace environment if I go somewhere and I get to be in management. So it's okay if you think a job is ruining your life, like you can't sleep at night, and no matter what job you have, occasionally you might have a night where you're thinking about work or whatever. That's normal. You might be excited about something, excited to give a presentation, excited to onboard a new employee, excited to take on a new role, and you can't sleep. Or you might have something big going on and you want it to go well or whatever. That's normal. That's life. But if you are sick to your stomach to go to work, that's not going to work, right? Like, because that's going to impact your performance. If in an environment that I just described, if you can ultimately find a way to perform, then my recommendation is to hang on until you find something better, where someone truly values your skill set and will nurture you. But don't leave in 6 months. I always tell people at a minimum on a resume, I like to see 2 years, ideally. Now there's circumstances, like you just might get into a horrible situation that lasts 8 months, or you might get recruited away. You might be somewhere for 2 years and you get recruited away and the place is a disaster and you're only there for a year or whatever. But those are things to consider. And I'm not sure who's going to ultimately watch this video, but I really started reflecting upon things that I wish somebody, while I was in my senior year of college, junior year in college, would have shared with me then. Somebody like me now sharing something like that about this is what to look out for. These are the types of people to look out for. That might have helped me. However, on the fun side is, like I said, I ultimately hung on for 6 years, became successful, and my job after that, I was only there for 2 years. I didn't like it. And I saw it as a stepping stone kind of situation from where I previously was working. And plus I moved what, 4 or 5 hours away. And this is before all the working from home kind of stuff. This was like early 2000s, late 2000s. And so I was there for 2 years, and then my next place I was at for 6 years, and then currently 8 years and counting. And that's worked for me. And with each move, which each kind of role change or like company change, it was a step up the ladder. And within those roles, I've stepped up the ladder. So there's luck. Luck plays a hand in it, because I've also sometimes been places and seen managers, people get promoted into these roles, and I think, oh man, like wrong guy, right place, right time kind of situation. And I think, hey, if I could just be, whether I'm the right guy or the wrong guy, in the right place, right time, I'll get my chance. And I feel like luck is something you create. If you work hard enough and you work long enough, you don't make excuses, and you look in the mirror and you're willing to change as the environment changes around you, your luck will come. It won't be the first time something comes up. Likely Lady Luck may not be in your corner. So be patient for Lady Luck, and don't waver with how hard you work and those other qualities I just said. So in summary, I just want to say, when you're getting out of school and you're moving into the workplace, be willing to be accountable, be willing to be coachable, put in your best effort always, and maybe take on things that you wouldn't normally want to take on. Maybe it's a project, maybe it's taking on a little extra work and you have to put in some time after hours. That's what separates yourself. And lastly, workplace environment. Aside from the illegal and the harassment and all that stuff, roll with it, put up with it. It'll make you stronger as a professional within reason. And then doors will open up for you, because you would have made them open up for you. So let me know what your experiences are, for those of you who have kind of gone through this. Would certainly like to share office war stories, because I got a lot of them, and I was really reflecting on it at this point in my career and thinking, how can I use some of my stories without really sharing the specifics to help others, and maybe it's a inspiration to thought for something. Well, thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments, and depending on how this goes, there might be more to come. Thanks for watching.